Yes, the most pointless episode in the history of this podcast. Why are you tuning in? You all know what happened.
Welcome back to Motorsport 101. See, called an audible there, because I'm just a clever host like that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 601 of Motorsport 101. I am the dunker of this alley-oop, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us as ever. And, well, a certain Mr. Co-host, Mr. Cameron Buckley, was probably spot on in his assessment in that intro. I honestly don't know why you're here. Listening to this feels like charity for our sakes and a justification of your hard-earned Patreon money because, well, it's MotoGP at the Saxon Ring. Marc Marquez is alive and he's on the best bike in the sport. What do you think happened?
All I'm saying is, fuck a Habsburg dynasty, fuck a Frederick the Great, or Wilhelm II. This, my friends, is the greatest king that Germany has ever seen.
It wasn't going to be the funny mustache man, now was it?
Because it was never a king.
That was RJ O'Connell. That was also Cameron Buckley. And we're going to review the MotoGP German Grand Prix from the Saxon Ring. And, well, Marc Marquez reclaimed his throne as the Saxon King. It's been a long time coming. It's actually somehow been 4 years since the last time he won this race. It's easy to forget last year we had, the bad start and the injury, so he had to start from midfield and end up second. We had the 2023 end of an age at Honda where he crashed 6 times in a weekend, and 2022, well, arm surgery's fun. So we've had to wait a while for this one. And
especially when it's arm surgery number 4.
Yeah, and we got there in the end, and this one hit like crack. Let me tell you, it was an unstoppable weekend for Marc Marquez. His 7th win of the season, his 4th double victory in a row. By the way, those 7 wins are all double victories as well. So yeah, 7 doubles on the year. First time it's ever happened in MotoGP history where someone has had 7 double victories since we went to the sprint format in 2023. And he's won every available point of the last 4 weekends. Starting to feel ominous out here, isn't it? This is the part in the Space Jam movie where he goes, it's kind of getting one-sided, ain't it? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the reclaiming of another throne. The turn of poor judgment. It claimed many a victim during the race itself, and we'll talk about that in a bit. The fact that we ended up with a status quo at the front, and drama. The Jorge Martin contract dispute is over. And probably not in the way you'd expect it. We'll talk about that a little bit towards the end of the show, but here's some places you can find us in the meantime. We're on youtube.com/motorsport101. We're on facebook.com/motorsport101. We're on Twitter at motorsport_101. We're on Blue Sky. You can follow us all individually on there at Dre Harrison, at RJ O'Connell, and at Cam C. Buckley 917 at .bsky.social. We're on Instagram, Motorsport101pod. We are on TikTok, M101_podcast. We have our website, motorsport101.com. And if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our content. You can upgrade to the $10 tier to listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Ghost Raptor is dominating our chat right now with Waffle alongside Kira. Thanks for tuning in alongside Jason as well. Hope you guys enjoy the show. And don't forget, if you want to back us for an entire year, you can do so up front and save yourself 30%. That's fun. Who doesn't love discounts? It's 12 months for the price of 9. What's not to love? You get the off-season thrown in for free. I'm sure that's a very good value deal somewhere to somebody. But, in the meantime, we'll figure the rest out later. Right, without further ado, let's get into MotoGP's German Grand Marquez.
We welcome you back to the Saxon Ring, the second home of Marc Marquez, the Saxon King. And despite a washout on Saturday morning, there was nothing that was stopping the Ant-Man, that's what we're calling him, from reclaiming his throne in Germany. He had to work for it in the sprint after running wide and dropping to fifth down for turn 1, but quick comeback and Franco Morbidelli's accident led to a furious chase down of Aprilia's Marco Bezzecchi, passing the Italian on the final lap to win his 10th sprint of 2025. On dry Sunday, Marquez led lights the flag as chaos ensued behind him, as it usually does, with Ogura, John Mir, Johan Zarco, Marco Bezzecchi, and Fabio Di Antonio all crashing out of turn one. It led to just 10 bikes making the checkered flag the lowest in a MotoGP race since Australia 2001. But wait, there's more. Call now, and we'll throw in Lorenzo Savadori into that turn one crash absolutely free.
My bad, I forgot to put his name in the script. There's another one who crashed at turn one. He actually got himself a double long lap penalty for his next Grand Prix of who knows when, because he crashed when in the middle of the Ogura mere splash zone, and by MotoGP rules, you're not allowed to crash in a yellow flag zone, and picked himself up a double long lap penalty. It's
after already crashing earlier in the race himself.
Yeah, there was his second crash on the day. It really wasn't a good day for Lorenzo Savadori on that one. But yes, we'll talk about the Grand Prix in a little bit. But we got to talk about the sprint first because, well, that was where most of the drama was this weekend. And, well, Cam, it wouldn't be Marc Marquez without a minor mistake and then having to dig himself out of a small hole now, would it?
No, he's just adding. It's just another Thunder Plate challenge for Marc Marquez.
Side quests. He
is getting the rare armor. Yeah. I mean, there's not really a lot that anyone listening to this show is going to learn. Marc Marquez dropped down the field. He went flying back through because even though it would be better for his championship to not do so, he's Marc Marquez and he can't help himself. If you were to sum up this weekend in a single lap, it's the final lap of the sprint where he passes Marco Bezzecchi. Bezzecchi stays with him through the right-handers. He's about a bike length behind going into the series of lefts. He's about 20 bike lengths behind at the end of the lefts. It looked like Bezzecchi gave up.
Yeah, basically, Marc overtakes Bezzecchi on the first corner of the final lap, gets the run off the final corner because Bez was really starting to struggle down the waterfall into Sector 4 on the final laps of that race, where Marc had a good half-second advantage in that part of the track. And despite overtaking Bez, and it wasn't the cleanest of passes, he did run a little wide into turn one. He passed Bez at turn 2 and on the exit of turn 1, taking the long way around to cut back in on the inside of 2. Despite all of that, he still won the sprint by nearly a second. That's how much of a pace advantage he had. And that's the beautiful and yet horrible nature of Marc Marquez. If you're a fan of his, he will give you a heart attack en route to a victory every once in a while, because there was like 2 occasions where he very nearly high-sided himself into oblivion. Like he passed Fabio Quartararo for second with about 6 laps to go, and immediately after he passed him, he had a huge tank slapper and nearly lost it. And it would have been curtains for any other rider on the grid, but Marc is just so delicate on the throttle. He was just about able to hold on to it, and that was the end of the discussion, really, because the thing about this was that Marc afterwards in the press conference was pretty much along the lines of, I'm battling my own instincts, because his instinct said go for the win. The smart man was like, I know Alex Marquez is in 8th right now. My main threat is way down the order. I'm already playing with house money because Alex is in not as good a position as he normally is in a sprint. I could have just taken the 9 points and it's still a huge +7 gain on the sprint. But he realised he was taking 4 tenths out of Bezzecchi a lap and thought, I'm going to go for the win. And he did. And he won. Just about in the end, given the unpredictable nature of that circuit. But it's a vintage Marc Marquez performance. It really was one for the ages. And yeah, just the level of confidence and speed that he had. Like, the one that got me, I don't know if you saw it, Cam, was the picture from Matt Oxley where it was like, Gigi Dall'Igna told him, take it easy on the waterfall. He was 1.5 tenths faster than anybody else all weekend on that corner. It's just ridiculous.
Pretty much. That moment when he passed Fabio, he crashed. He just didn't drop anything.
Yeah, more or less.
Is more or less what that looked like. Quartararo, again, doing the Lord's work for a Yamaha that just is not competitive. There's not really a lot to say about the main race other than the turn one of poor judgment.
We'll get to that in a bit as well, but the other thing, I wish that the only other major highlight of the sprint, and it's not a nice one, was Frankie Morbidelli's crash, which is grim. It is horrible to watch, that one. It was one of those ones where I say, don't go out of your way to watch that one. Thankfully, he's relatively fine. Somehow didn't break a bone on that one. If you see it for yourself, you'll see to yourself, how did that even happen? That's not physically possible. I watched that man do 6 barrel rolls in a gravel trap. But horrible crash, downhill in 8th place. So it was in 2nd place at the time, was downhill at turn 8, loses the front, slides off. It's a gravel trap, and it's not a long one in particular to get down there. And the man cartwheels 5 or 6 times, pulls out of the Grand Prix, out of this race, is out of the Brno's Grand Prix this weekend as well with a shoulder contusion. Yeah, just a contusion, somehow. It was the pain that stopped him from continuing, not because it was a broken bone or it needs to be operated on or something along those lines. So, yeah, it's not ideal at all in that sense.
What we also had was both Tech 3 KTMs not participating this weekend because Enea Bastianini with the dreaded appendicitis.
Oof. We've seen that in F1 in the last couple of years. Not fun.
Yeah, so Bastianini should win this race coming up by like 10 seconds.
Yeah. Apparently losing your appendix apparently makes you 10 seconds a lap quicker. Who knew?
That's all the help Sainz needed back in 24.
Oh, yeah.
Vinales has just been... It wasn't very good, and then it got a little better with KTM, and now it is just injury after bad weekend.
Yeah, basically, Saturday morning qualifying, it was a wet qualifying session. He tries the medium rear tyre for the wets, and the problem with the mediums was you couldn't get heat into them. So within 30 seconds of that qualifying session starting, because there's no grip on the medium wet rear, Maverick immediately, when he puts the power down coming out of turn 4, spins the rear up, launches him overhead, lands on his shoulder, and breaks a bone in it. So he
broke the top off his own shoulder.
Yeah. So again, was out for the Grand Prix, is out this weekend in Brno. Paul Espargaro is taking his place on this one. Hopefully Maverick will be back after the summer break for the second half of the season once we get going again. Get well soon, big man. But yeah, it's to allude to the point. As Cam points out, once you add in Frankie Morbidelli, Maverick Vinales, Enea Bastianini to the already injured Somkiat Chantra, who tore his LCL in a training accident a week out. This was the lowest amount of starters for a MotoGP race in over 2 years. Like, last time we had a race with only 18 starters was Australia 2023 in that one. And as you worked out earlier, because of all the crashes at turn 1 during the Grand Prix, we only had 10 finishes, lowest in the Grand Prix since Australia 2011. Only the second time since 1990 we've had just 10 bikes finish a Grand Prix. It doesn't happen very often where we're barely in double-digit finishes. It is a big old war of attrition, Cam. And, well, turn 1 was really one of poor judgment.
Yes. Let's see. We had... going through the second half of this race, tires are wearing down, fuel's burning off, and the conditions were already treacherous enough, and we know what we're dealing with the Michelin front tire in the year of our Lord 2025. Death, taxes, everybody tucks the front.
yeah, just one of those ones where I think the theory goes is that it's the unique nature of the Saxon ring. First of all, whoever created Turn 1 had violent intent for its races, because it's a nasty corner. It's a 190 mile an hour braking zone. You've got it's blind, it's downhill, and it's off camber. It's a first gear corner. It's a nasty combination of turns. All of that it's a horrible combination, and then you're spending the previous 20-25 seconds of the previous lap not turning right, because you've got, after the waterfall, it's 2 pretty lengthy straights and 2 left-handers. So that asymmetric front tyre they use at the Saxon ring, the right side of it's cold by the time you get to turn 1 and you're hitting the brakes again. So once you factor all of that in, it makes turn 1 a very, very nasty corner to race around, and it's very, very easy. Maybe the easiest track or maybe the easiest corner on the whole calendar to tuck the front and crash. We've had a couple of famous incidences with that in recent years. Jorge Martin, this race last year with 2 laps to go, tucks the front and crashes out from the lead in a race he had relatively under control against Pecco Bagnaia. A couple of years ago, 2021, Pecco Bagnaia crashes out against Fabio Quartararo. That was the last time Fabio won a Grand Prix. Bagnaia crashes. All of a sudden, Bagnaia has 91 points off the championship lead. It would be a miracle if he could come back from there. So it is a nasty, nasty corner that just brings out the nasty, and it brings out the horrible in bike races, in the sense of it's a nightmare to be able to handle. And yeah, it leads to a lot of crashes, in which case we had 6 of them in one corner. Pedro Acosta also had a DNF on the day, but he crashed at turn 2 rather than turn 1. Another rare one in its own right. You don't normally see a bike rider go off there, losing the front and going off there. But I mean, as a result, RJ, it all ended up like status quo at the front again. And despite it all, and despite all the chaos, we got Marquez, Bagnaia as the podium instead.
The big 3 up at the front. Or 4th. Allgaier 5th. This is pretty much about what I expected. Luca Marini, Alfa Vinales, Jack Miller.
Huge race for Marini, given his comeback from his own injury. Get P6 on that thing.
Yeah, Honda's best result as a manufacturer since Marquez left them.
Well, factory Honda.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound bleak. Although, with that kind of uptick in form, it makes you wonder why a certain reigning world champion might have wanted to go there.
Yeah, you segued that in beautifully without me even realizing. Well played there, RJ. Well played. Yes, because this race pretty much also marked the end of the Jorge Martin contract dispute, as the world champion conceded his holdout from Aprilia and confirmed he will honour his contract until the end of 2026, the end of next season. And as a small fast forward to Bruno's press conference yesterday, the day before we're recording this, he basically admitted, yep, I'm going to be staying for the rest of my contract. I changed my mind. I was concerned about the injuries and the injuries that I'd had. He also admitted he had no regrets over the holdout in the first place. He admitted basically that, quote, I was doing what I thought was best for me and my future. So, gentlemen, now that's over and done with, and now that's all been cleared up. How do you feel about it now it's all said and done?
Cammy, go first, because I'm kind of in two minds about this. Am I thinking, like, did he just realize that, like, there was going to be no leverage for him? Or did he just look at Marco Bezzecchi and think, you know what, maybe this isn't so bad after all?
Bit of both, I suspect. I just look at this like, what an enormous waste of all of our time. What an enormous waste of keystrokes on keyboards. Yeah, it was not going to be a good look, no matter how it turned out, if this dragged on to either him leaving, burning his contract after less than a year at a team, and it wasn't going to look good if he dragged it out into the courts. And I really suspect if he had dragged it into the courts, he would have got destroyed, because Aprilia sounded extremely confident that they would have won in that scenario. At the same time, Bezzecchi's out there proving that the Aprilia can be a competitive bike in competitive hands. If you consider what Martin is as a rider, chances are he might have a win on the board, or at least something, without all the injuries he's had up to this point.
And if Martin's being sincere, which I think he is when he was talking about this at the press conference yesterday, and talking about the nature of his injuries being an influencing factor in all of this, I can't hold that against him. This is a sport where some people have paid the ultimate price, trying to look for that extra tenth or that extra margin. Now, you can argue or debate all you want about how self-inflicted those injuries were with Jorge Martin. We know Qatar certainly wasn't. It was just an unfortunate coincidence that Diggia Antonio was in that space when he crashed it in Qatar. The training injuries did not help. That one, again, was nothing to do with Aprilia before the season started. Of course, the big one is the one he suffered in Sepang during the preseason test, which was of Martin's own making. That was partly a rider-induced error by being on the gravel the lap before he actually crashed. So a part of me is thinking it's probably unfair to paint Aprilia as this. You've created this like hydrogen bomb of a bike that will throw a rider off on a bad day. I don't think Aprilia deserves that reputation right now for what its RSGP 25 is. But on the other hand, I do sympathise with his situation because, look, you're a MotoGP rider. You've probably got a screw loose if you want to ride a motorcycle at 220 miles an hour in the first place. That's not something the rational do. And when you've been through injuries that, look, the one in Qatar could have killed him. You know, he was a very, very lucky boy to come out of Qatar the way that he did. When you've got to sit at home and recover in an ICU ward and think about what happened, maybe you can blame the bike. Maybe you can figure out or come up with a reason in your own headspace to think Aprilia might be responsible for this in some way, and I just don't want to be here. I've watched enough episodes of Dr. House to know how some patients can think, can lie, can manipulate the truth into making things feel like they're in their favor, even if they're not necessarily true. It's a complicated one, is what I will say. I don't think it's one that there's a straightforward answer about Martin, his headspace, and how he's acted. What I will say is that from what I've known, what I've been told, Carmelo Ezperelta's statement at Assen was the final straw. Him basically saying, we will not register you for the World Championship next year if you're still in a contract dispute, was the smoking gun that finally made Albert Valera, his agent, back down. Because their camp knew that if this was going to go to the courts, and Aprilia were not going to go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is, you know, basically the toughest sporting court in the land for those who don't know, over in Spain. They were going to settle this in their own courts in Milan. This could have taken months to iron out, and by the time it gets settled, the grid might already be formed for next year anyway.
Yeah, Honda would have to move on and sign somebody to that seat. And look, what Dorna is looking at is the reigning world champion is in a contract dispute. They're bringing the sport into disrepute.
Allegedly, Liberty had a word with Carmelo in regards to that situation and was like, shut this down. And so that's what I've allegedly been told by certain sources in the paddock. Liberty was like, sort this out, would you, Carmelo? Because this is getting out of hand. And that's for the exact reasons that Cam said. It's a bad look for everybody involved if the reigning world champion is in a contract dispute with a factory team on the grid. No one comes out of this looking good.
No.
And as a part-time social media admin who reads the comments on this, a part of me feels bad for Martin because I've seen the comments and they were not pretty in regards to Martin's reputation and how he's handled this. And again, I don't think that's totally fair, but unfortunately, bike racing circles are not the place you normally find nuance, is what I will say. I'm glad it's been ironed out. I'm glad we can all move on. I think it's more interesting for the sport that Jorge Martin's on an Aprilia. The Aprilia is a race winner this season. It's unlucky not to have two this season from Marco Bezzecchi, who's having a very good season right now in his first year on Aprilia. I think if Martin is up to speed quickly with his extra pace, why not? Why can't he challenge for a win or two later on this year on a good day for Aprilia? We've seen what Bez very nearly won an Assen. Why not Bez? In the same way we could say, why not Jorge?
Thank you.
Okay?
I'm going to start having to charge for royalties. No, it's just one point I want to make is Martin's only been here for a bit of change, practically. Even
he effectively
one club
hasn't been here. This coming weekend in Brno is going to be, hopefully, acts of God otherwise, an actual full weekend for the man.
Even guys have been on one club, one team, other stick and ball or foot and ball sports, and probably thought, what would it be like to play for this other club or play in this other city? Doesn't mean they necessarily go through with it. It doesn't necessarily mean they get into a messy contract dispute so crazy that the sport has to step in about it. But that kind of stuff does happen.
Yeah. It's not normal that two sides were prepared to dig in basically in the war zone equivalent of a siege over this, essentially. For a hot minute, I really thought this was going to end up in a courtroom. Because
I did as well.
I mean, at Assen, Albert Valera was insistent that this clause was there. They were going to remain into this clause and that there was no backing down and that Honda was an option. A week later, the AS are reporting that it's over. We had no idea that was coming. And then, obviously, by the time we got to Brno in Germany this weekend, it was like, no, it really is over. Martin is just going to end up staying. And like I said, Martin had no choice. The Aprilia held all the aces in this dispute. Whether they were right or wrong, we'll never know, truly. But Aprilia had one thing in their favour, the power of time. And when you can run the clock on this situation and it's not even like this would be a silly season sort of year because 3/4 of the grid are already under contract. If this was 2026 and this was happening, there'd be a lot more interest and there might be more of a reason for Jorge to hold out. But the best he was going to get was a factory Honda who are in a bit of a messy situation right now and not a straightforward one. The moment that comes off the table, what else? Pramac again? Really? LCR? I mean, that was pretty much all that was left.
Pramac Ducati isn't good enough for me. Let me get a Pramac Yamaha.
No, that wasn't going to happen.
No, not in a month of Sundays. And again, Aprilia was more or less unintentionally able to pit the organizing body of the sport against him in this situation.
There's still time. There's still time to drop the nuclear option, drop it into first, rev it to max. It's worked before. It may work again. No, but seriously, that would be foolish.
No, it wouldn't be a good idea. No, it's question from out in the chat saying if Martin was to win a race later this year or podium, which upcoming track would be most likely, probably Phillip Island. Bit of an equaliser. Everybody tends to do quite well on it. Indonesia, Martin tends to like that track quite a lot. Maybe that's the one. prettier like slow grip. That could be a potential option for him.
I don't know, man. I'm scared of what Mark is going to do on the current Ducati in Phillip Island. So what he did with the old one last year.
The problem is it's hard to say anything about other winners when Mark is looking this good.
Yeah, just take your previous sentence, delete Phillip Island, and it just applies. Replace Phillip Island with any other track.
Yeah, I mean, out of the last 148 points available, Mark has scored 148 points.
What can you do?
There is nothing to do.
He's been suffocatingly brilliant and virtually perfect for the last 4 race weekends. He now has an 83-point lead on the championship ahead of his brother Alex. Francesco Bagnaia is third. He is now 147 points back, which more or less is 4 full race weekends.
Yeah, I mean, Pecco's weekend in the Saxon Ring. He will consider himself lucky to have gotten third in the race. In the sprint, he was 12th. He said himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had never been so slow in the wet before.
Yeah.
This being a multiple wet race winner from 2024. And he was utterly incapable of scoring points in the sprint.
Yep. And was taken to Gapplebee's by Alex. Just dominant display. Well done, Alex, by the way, for still getting a second in the Grand Prix with that broken finger. Did really, really well. That's the definition of a salvage job, given he was in a lot of pain. He got off the Grand Prix bike and immediately was holding a bag of ice for that broken finger, which, not fun to be able to basically break with 3 fingers. But he got through it, and he got second. He openly admitted, Alex, he wouldn't have tried it if it wasn't for the fact he was in a title fight. Felt like he had to try, and it worked out in the end. So that'll just about do it for this episode of MotoGP. We'll be back in Brno this weekend to talk about that. Brno is back on the calendar. Yes! Oh, I love Brno. It's going to be so good.
You'll never guess who topped opening practice.
Yeah, it was Marc Marquez again. I know, you're shocked by a good half second in the pouring rain.
Hey, at least this time the decimal point isn't in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Wait, it wasn't before?
They can't all be 2019. But
no.
They'll be back next week to talk about that. We'll also be talking about IndyCar in Toronto next week as well. But we've got to get through another IndyCar weekend first over in Iowa. Glory to the land of corn. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cameron Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Until next time, thank you very much for listening. Sayonara.
Later, y'all.
Much is over here as it is over there. That damn Spaniard.